A coach looked me in the face when I was 17 and told me I would never make the team. Not his team, any team. He said it the way a man reads a weather report, like it was already settled, like he was doing me a favor by getting it over with early. I believed him for 11 years. I put my glove in a box in the back of a closet, took a job loading trucks at 4 in the morning, got married, had a daughter, and learned to change the channel whenever a game came on, because watching it hurt in a place I didn't have a word for yet. Then, at 29 years old, with a mortgage and a bad back, and a kid who had never once seen her father pitch, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, and everything I thought I understood about time came apart in my hands. This is the story of the 11 years in between. And I'll tell you now, the hardest part was never the coach. The hardest part was the man I became after I believed him. I grew up in a town where the water tower had the high school mascot painted on the side, and where everybody's father worked at one of 3 places. Mine worked at a truck garage on Route 9. Walt Mercer, 41 years old, hands permanently stained the color of engine oil, a man who could diagnose a bad transmission by the sound it made pulling into the lot. He's the one who taught me to throw, not in some dramatic way. There was no montage. There was just a strip of gravel driveway between our house and the neighbor's fence, and a piece of plywood he'd nailed to the garage wall with a strike zone spray painted on it, slightly crooked because he'd done it after a 12-hour shift and hadn't bothered to measure. We threw almost every night from the time I was 6, not because he thought I was going somewhere, because that was how he talked. My father was not a man who said much at the dinner table, but out on that gravel, glove popping, he'd talk for an hour straight. About the shop, about his own father, about a game he'd seen in 1979 that he described so many times I could see it myself. Baseball was the language he had. I learned it because it was the only way to hear him. By 14, I could throw harder than anyone in my grade, and by 16, I was the kid opposing parents pointed at from the bleachers. I had a fastball that came out of my hand heavy, and a curveball that was honestly a mess. It broke different every time, which made it either unhittable or a home run, with nothing in between. I struck out 14 in a district game my junior year, and my father drove home with his window down in 40-degree weather because he said the truck was hot, which it was not. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where the story usually turns into a lie. Most people telling you a story like mine will say they were special, that everyone knew. That's not true. I was good in a town of 11,000 people. That's a very specific kind of good. Big enough to change how strangers treat you at the grocery store. Small enough to mean nothing 4 counties over. I didn't know the difference at 17. Nobody tells you the difference at 17. What I did have, and this matters later, was a way of watching. I could see a hitter's front shoulder open a half-second early and know what he was sitting on. Tommy Vance, who caught me from Little League through high school and is still the best friend I have, used to say I called a better game from the mound than he did from behind the plate. That skill was worth exactly nothing to anyone evaluating a 17-year-old. Radar guns don't measure it. My mother, Sharon, worked the front desk at a dental office and kept the household running on a budget she never once complained about out loud. She came to fewer games than my father did, and I held that against her for a few stupid years before I understood that somebody had to be home when the water heater failed, and that it was always her. She's the one who told me, years later, that my father used to sit in the truck in the driveway after games and write in a notebook before he came inside. I didn't know what she meant at the time. The summer before senior year, a new coach took over the program. Dennis Cole. He came from a bigger school 2 hours away, wore a windbreaker in August, and carried a clipboard the way some men carry a badge. The first thing he did was tell us that nothing we'd done before he arrived counted. I remember thinking that sounded fair. Tryouts that year lasted 3 days. On the second day it rained, and we moved into the gym, and Coach Cole had all the pitchers throw into a net while he stood behind us with a radar gun that he never once turned so we could see the number. I threw well. I know that's what everyone says, but Tommy was catching, and Tommy would have told me otherwise. I threw well. On the 3rd day, he read the roster out loud in the locker room instead of posting it, which I've since learned is a thing certain men do because they like watching faces. My name wasn't on it, not cut entirely. I was listed as a reliever, at the bottom, behind 2 sophomores. I waited until everyone cleared out, and then I knocked on his office door and asked him what I needed to work on. That's the exact question I asked. What do I need to work on? I was 17, I had my glove under my arm, and I genuinely believed the answer was going to be something I could go fix on the gravel that night. He didn't look up right away. When he did, he set his pen down and said, Ray, I'm going to be honest with you, because nobody else will be. You've got a nice arm for around here, but you're not a prospect. You've got no frame, no secondary pitch, and no ceiling. You're going to spend the next few years chasing something that's never going to happen, and you'll be 25 with nothing to show for it. My advice? Play out the season, enjoy it, and go find something real. Then he picked the pen back up. I want you to understand something about a sentence like that. It doesn't hurt right away. It's like touching something so cold your brain registers it as heat. I actually thanked him. I said, "Okay, thanks, coach," and walked out to the parking lot and sat in my father's borrowed truck and felt almost calm, almost relieved, because a door closing is quieter than a door you have to keep pushing on. I never told my father what he said. Not that year, not ever. That's the one I'd take back if I could take back one thing. I pitched 11 innings my senior year. Mop-up duty mostly. Blowouts in both directions. My father came to every game anyway, and stood down the left field line by himself. And when I didn't get in, he'd say the same thing on the drive home. "Arm feels good though, right?" And I'd say yeah, and that would be it. Nobody recruited me, nobody was ever going to from 11 innings. There was a junior college 3 hours north that would have taken a walk-on, and I filled out half the application in April and left it in a drawer. I told myself it was about money, and money was genuinely tight, so the lie held up under inspection. Tommy tried to talk me into filling it out. He came by the house twice that spring, once with the coach's phone number written on the back of a receipt. I told him I'd think about it. I told him that for 6 weeks, which is how long it takes for a thing to stop being a decision and start being a fact. Graduation came, the guys who were going somewhere went. Tommy went to a state school on a partial, and I got hired at a distribution center off the interstate. Third shift, loading trailers, $11 and change an hour with a shift differential that made it almost 12. I remember my first night there. The dock doors rolled up at 4 in the morning and cold air came in off the lot, and I thought, clearly, without any drama at all, this is what real is. That word stayed with me a long time. Real. It's a word people hand you when they want you to stop. Here's the thing nobody warns you about when a dream ends. It doesn't end. It just goes underground and keeps running, and you spend years pretending you can't hear it. I was good at that job. That's the part that complicates it. I learned the routes, learned the equipment, got promoted to lead within 2 years, then to supervisor by 23. Miguel, who ran the shift before me, taught me how to build a load so it wouldn't shift on a mountain grade, and how to talk to a driver who's been awake 19 hours. I was competent and I was respected, and I was, on paper, doing fine. I met Nicole at a friend's cookout when I was 21. She worked at a dental office, laughed at things before they were fully funny, and asked me on the second date what I'd wanted to be when I was a kid. I said I never really thought about it. That was the first thing I ever lied to her about, and it took me 7 years to correct it. We got married at 23 in her aunt's backyard. My father wore a suit I'd never seen and cried during the toast, which none of us were prepared for. He died 8 months later. Heart, sudden, in the bay at the shop with a customer's car still up on the lift. 48 years old. I want to skip past this part, and I'm not going to, because if I skip it, the rest of the story doesn't make sense. My mother, Sharon, handled the arrangements. I handled the house. And in the back of the hall closet, behind winter coats, I found a cardboard box with my name written on it in his handwriting. Inside was every scorebook from every season I ever pitched, from age 8 through senior year, kept in his own hand. Innings, strikeouts, little notes in the margins, next to a game from my junior year, in pencil. Best I ever saw him. I sat on that hallway floor for a long time. And then I put the box back in the closet and I did not open it again for 5 years. Because grief and shame get tangled up in a way that's hard to explain. And the thing I felt looking at those scorebooks wasn't pride. It was the sense of having wasted something that belonged to someone else. Ruby was born when I was 24. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, absolutely furious about the whole arrangement. Nicole says I held her in the hospital and didn't say a word for 20 minutes. Life got full in the way life gets full. Diapers and a mortgage on a small place with aluminum siding and a water heater that failed twice. Overtime whenever they offered it. I was a good father and a decent husband, and I was 30 pounds heavier than I'd been at 18, and I could not, for the life of me, tell you what I actually wanted. Somewhere in there I stopped watching baseball. Not dramatically, I'd just find a reason to leave the room. Nicole noticed before I did. She asked me once, casually, why we never had a game on, and I said I'd gotten out of the habit. There's a specific kind of ache that comes with being 26, and realizing that nothing in the next 30 years is going to surprise you. It's not depression exactly. It's more like standing in a hallway with all the doors already closed and being told by everyone around you that this is what maturity feels like. I would have stayed in that hallway. I'm sure of it. What got me out was a beer league softball game and a man named Tommy Vance who never learned to leave things alone. Tommy had come back to town by then. He'd gotten hurt in college, finished his degree, and taken a job selling industrial supplies. Every spring he put together a softball team out of guys we'd gone to school with, and every spring for 4 years I said no. The year I turned 26, they were a man short on a Thursday, and he called me at 6:15 and said the game started at 7 and hung up before I could answer. I played outfield. I went 1 for 3. It was by any measure meaningless, except that at the end, one of the guys wanted to try throwing from the mound, and a few of us were messing around, and Tommy put on the catcher's gear, 'cause Tommy will always put on the catcher's gear, and I threw one. Just to throw it. He caught it, took the ball out of his mitt, and looked at it. Then he looked at me. "Do that again," he said. I did. 12 or 13 more. Not full effort. I hadn't stretched. I was wearing running shoes. I was 26 years old and 11 years removed from anything that mattered. Tommy stood up, walked halfway to the mound, and said, "Ray, that's not a beer league arm." I laughed at him. I want to be clear that I laughed at him out loud in front of 5 other guys because that was easier than the alternative. But I drove home with my hands still buzzing, and I sat in the driveway of my own house for 11 minutes without going inside. 2 weeks later, I went to a batting cage complex out by the highway that had a radar-equipped pitching lane, mostly used by 14-year-olds and their fathers. I paid $9. I threw 20 pitches in a hooded sweatshirt while a kid in the next lane worked on his swing. 88, then 89, then a 91, that I felt all the way up my spine. I stood in that cage and I did not feel triumphant. That's the part people get wrong. I felt sick, because 91 at 26 meant that at 17, whatever I'd been, it hadn't been nothing. And that meant 11 years of, he was right about me, had been 11 years of something else entirely. I went home and I didn't tell Nicole. I told her I'd stopped for gas. For 4 months I ran a private life. I'd throw in the mornings after third shift when the park by the elementary school was empty, into a chain-link backstop with a bucket of scuffed baseballs I bought used. I'd come home, shower, sleep 3 hours, get Ruby from daycare. My arm hurt in ways I had to learn to distinguish, the good soreness in the meat of the shoulder versus the bad, bright pain along the elbow that meant stop. I got a book on pitching mechanics out of the county library, which is a genuinely humbling thing to check out at 26. I filmed myself on a phone propped in a Gatorade bottle. I discovered my front side had been flying open since I was 15, and that nobody had ever told me, and that fixing it added movement I didn't know I had. That's when it stopped being nostalgia and became something more dangerous. Because I wasn't just remembering being a pitcher. I was becoming a better one than I'd ever been, alone, in a park, at an age when the whole world agrees you're finished. I told exactly one person, Tommy. He met me at that park on a Saturday in August with his old catcher's mitt, which he'd kept for 11 years in a garage, which tells you something about him too. He caught me for 20 minutes and didn't say anything until we were walking back to the cars. Then he said, "You know what the worst part is? You're better now than you were at 17. You just weren't allowed to find out." Nicole found the bucket of baseballs in the trunk in October. She didn't yell. I almost wish she had. She came in the house holding one of the scuffed balls in her hand like evidence, and she sat down at the kitchen table across from me, and she said, "How long?" I said 4 months. She was quiet for a while. Then she asked the question that broke the whole thing open. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I heard myself say, "Because I didn't want you to look at me the way he did." I hadn't planned to say it. I hadn't said Coach Cole's name out loud in 9 years. But it came out, all of it. The office, the pen, the sentence about being 25 with nothing to show for it. And here's the thing I hadn't accounted for. Nicole didn't get sad. Nicole got angry, in a cold, precise way I'd only seen twice in our marriage. She said, "You've been carrying a 17-year-old's homework assignment from a man who saw you throw for 3 days." Then she said, "How good are you? Actually, not what you hope. What you know." I told her the truth. I said I didn't know. I said the number was real, but the number was only a number. That I hadn't faced a live hitter since high school. That I was 26 going on 27. That men my age don't start, they finish. I said the honest version. Probably not good enough. Probably. She said, "Then go find out. because I can't live another 20 years with a man who's 90% here. That's my wife. That's the whole woman in one sentence. We had the money conversation the same night, and I'm going to give you the real numbers, because stories like this always skip them, and that's how they become useless. We had $6,400 in savings. The mortgage was $980 a month. Ruby was 3, in daycare 4 days a week. I made $49,000 a year with the differential, plus insurance that actually covered things. Independent League Baseball, the kind that holds open tryouts, the kind that isn't affiliated with any major league team, pays between $800 and $1,400 a month for a 5-month season. You share a host family's basement or a motel, you ride buses. Nobody's coming to save you. So the math didn't work. That's just a fact. The math did not work. What we did instead was ugly and practical and took 8 months. I didn't quit. I moved to a schedule that let me keep insurance and used every hour of vacation I'd banked in 6 years. Nicole picked up 2 extra days at the office. My mother took Ruby on Wednesdays. I found a former minor league pitcher named Dave, who gave lessons out of a warehouse 40 minutes away and charged me $60 an hour to tear my delivery down to studs and rebuild it. I threw all winter into a tarp in a rented storage unit with a space heater, because it was the only place I could find with a ceiling high enough. I turned 27 in February. Ruby made me a card with a drawing on it. Nicole had told her I was practicing baseball, and Ruby, being 3, had drawn a man throwing a ball to nobody, standing on a green square, alone. I kept that card. It's in my locker right now. Dave, the pitching instructor, told me in January that my arm was fine, and my problem was that I still pitched like a kid trying to impress somebody in the stands. He made me throw 400 pitches that winter to a target the size of a paperback book. I hated every one of them. In March, I found a listing for an open tryout for a team called the Rockford Aviators. 11 hours away, $60 to register, 240 guys expected. I put in for 3 days off, and I didn't tell anyone at work why. I drove out on a Thursday night, alone, and slept 4 hours in the truck in a rest area outside of Terre Haute, because the motels near the complex were full of other men doing the same thing I was. Here is what an open tryout actually looks like, since almost nobody who tells this story tells you. You show up at 7 in the morning to a field with dew still on it. There's a folding table where a kid 2 decades younger than you writes a number on a piece of cardstock and safety pins it to your shirt. I was number 118. Some guys came with their fathers. Some came with agents, which felt absurd. One kid had a custom bag with his name embroidered on it, and then there were the others. The 31-year-old former AA guy with a surgical scar on his elbow like a zipper. The Dominican outfielder who'd been released twice and spoke almost no English, and was, by a distance, the best athlete on the property. A man named Ramon who told me, in the outfield grass while we waited, that this was his 6th tryout in 4 years. I asked him why he kept coming back. He said, because the only way they can tell me no forever is if I stop showing up. They ran us through 60-yard dashes first, which is a cruel joke for a pitcher, and I finished in the back third and heard a kid behind me snort. Then they split the position players off and put the pitchers in a line by the bullpens. I waited 3 hours and 40 minutes to throw 15 pitches. That's the part that gets you. Not the throwing, the waiting. 3 hours and 40 minutes on a metal bench with a number pinned to your chest, watching guys ahead of you get waved off after 8 pitches, watching the coaches' faces, doing math about the drive home and the vacation days you spent, and the $60 and what exactly you'll say to your wife. Twice I stood up to leave. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. Twice. When they called 118, my legs felt like they belonged to somebody else. I got on the mound, and the catcher, some kid, 19 maybe, didn't even look up at me, just squatted and put down a target. First pitch, I overthrew it. Way high, the kind of pitch that ends a tryout. And then something happened that I've thought about more than almost anything in my life. I heard my father's voice. Not mystically, not as a sign, just memory, the way memory works. The flat, unimpressed thing he used to say from the gravel when I got wild. Same arm, throw the next one. I threw the next one. It caught the bottom of the zone and the kid's mitt moved for the first time. I threw 13 more. Fastball, fastball. The reworked breaking ball Dave had built me over the winter. Fastball. A man in a windbreaker behind the cage, and I noticed the windbreaker. God help me, I noticed it. Wrote something down. They said thank you. That's all. They said thank you and called 119. I stood behind the fence afterward and watched maybe 40 more guys throw, because I couldn't make myself walk to the truck. Ramon threw at number 173. He was good. He was clearly good, and he'd been clearly good at 5 previous tryouts, and I understood then that being good enough is not a threshold you cross once. It's a room you have to keep standing in while people decide things about you. He found me by the concession stand afterward and shook my hand and said, "See you next year, maybe." I drove 11 hours home that night and got in at 4 in the morning and lay in bed next to Nicole doing the thing where you replay 15 pitches 400 times. 9 days later, my phone rang while I was on a forklift. The voice on the phone belonged to a man named Gus Hendry, and I'd learned later that he'd been managing an independent ball for 22 years and had never once been offered a job in affiliated baseball, which tells you more about affiliated baseball than it does about Gus. He said, "Mercer, you're the 27-year-old. Not a question." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Your velocity is fine. Your breaking ball's a rumor, but you repeated your delivery 15 out of 15 times, and I've got kids here who can't do it 3 times in a row. Camp starts May 2nd. $900 a month. You'll probably get released by June. Do you want it or not? That's the offer. That's the whole offer. That's what 11 years of wondering came down to. A man being honest with me on a warehouse floor with a forklift beeping in the background. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I want to tell you the next part was glorious. It wasn't. The next part was the hardest 6 months of my adult life, and I need you to hear the real version, because the real version is the only one worth anything to you. I lived in the finished basement of a host family, the Kowalskis, Ed and Denise, who had put up ball players for 9 seasons and refused to take money for the room. I had a twin bed and a mini fridge and a window at ground level where I could watch feet walk by. I was, by 4 years, the oldest player on the roster. The bus rides were 7 and 8 hours through the middle of the country, arriving at 2 in the morning, playing the same night. I learned to sleep sitting up. I learned which gas stations had food that wouldn't wreck you. I learned that a 27-year-old body does not recover like a 22-year-old body, and that nobody in that clubhouse cared, and that saying it out loud once was enough to get a nickname I carried all season. And I got hit, badly. My first 11 appearances, I gave up runs in 8 of them. My ERA in June was 6.84. Hitters in that league weren't better than high school hitters. They were more patient. That's the whole difference, and it's an enormous difference. They didn't chase. They took my breaking ball for a ball, took the fastball on the corner because they knew the umpire wouldn't give it, and waited for the pitch I had to throw. And then they hit it a long way. I called Nicole after a game in Joliet where I'd faced 5 hitters and retired 1. She let me talk for 10 minutes. Then she asked how Ruby's picture looked taped in my locker. Denise Kowalski left a plate of food outside my door most nights that June, covered in foil. Never mentioned it the next morning. Ed had a folding chair down the third baseline and clapped for every player on the roster the same amount, which I've decided is a form of decency most people never manage. Missing them was a physical thing. Ruby was 3.5 and turning 4 in that stretch, and I watched her birthday on a video call from a Days Inn parking lot because the Wi-Fi inside was bad. She held the phone too close to her face, the way kids do, and asked me when I was coming home, and I said soon, and she said, "But when?" Because 4-year-olds don't accept soft answers. I hung up and sat on the curb outside that motel and told myself out loud that I would tell Gus in the morning that I was done. I didn't sleep, and at 6 a.m. I walked into the lobby and Gus was already down there with a coffee, and before I could open my mouth, he pointed at the chair across from him and said, "Sit down. I've been waiting 3 weeks for you to be ready to hear this." What Gus said to me in that motel lobby rearranged my life. He said, "You keep trying to be the pitcher that coach didn't want. You're 27. Stop it." I asked him what he meant. He said, "You throw 92. You know how many guys in this league throw 92? Almost all of them. It's the entry fee, not the advantage. You've got something none of them have and you're not using it because you think it doesn't count." He turned his coffee cup around on the table. "You see hitters," he said. "I've watched you in the dugout. You call the pitch 2 seconds before the catcher puts the sign down, and you're right about 70% of the time. You've been watching this game from the outside for a decade. That's not lost time. That's film study nobody assigned you." Then he taught me a changeup. Not a fancy one, a circle change, same arm speed, thrown to the same target as the fastball, which is a pitch I'd been told at 17 I didn't have the feel for. It took me 5 weeks to throw it for a strike. It took me 9 to trust it with runners on. But here's what actually changed, and it wasn't the pitch. It was the idea underneath it. For 11 years I had been trying to prove Dennis Cole wrong on his terms. Harder, faster, the ceiling he said I didn't have. Gus made me stop competing with a sentence from 2013 and start building something that only I could build, out of the specific and strange raw material of who I actually was. A 27-year-old with an average arm, a warehouse supervisor's discipline, and a decade of watching. By August, my ERA was 2.11. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and join us every day. Stories like this one, about the people everybody quietly wrote off, the ones who went and wrote their own ending anyway. That's exactly what we do here. Now let me tell you about the part I didn't see coming. In late August, a man started showing up. Same seat behind the plate, 3 rows up, radar gun on the railing, notebook. He was there for a Tuesday game against Schaumburg. He was there Thursday. He was there the following Tuesday in Gary. Ramon, the guy from the tryout, who'd made the roster too and become my roommate on the road, nudged me in the bullpen and said, "That's not for you, that's for the kid," meaning our 19-year-old shortstop who everyone assumed was the only one on our roster with a future. Ramon was wrong. The man's name was Frank Delgado, and he was a regional cross-checker for a major league organization. And on the last homestand of the season, he waited by the player's lot until I came out with my bag over my shoulder. He shook my hand and said, "How old are you, really?" I said 27, 28 in February. He said that's what I was afraid of. And then he said, "I'm going to be straight with you. Nobody in my office wants to sign a 28-year-old out of indie ball. It's not how the system works. But I've watched you throw 4 times, and I can't explain what I'm seeing with your stuff, which means you're doing something I don't understand yet, and that's the only thing in this job that's ever worth chasing." He gave me his card. He said, "Don't tell anybody about this conversation, including your wife." I told my wife that night. Some rules aren't for you. The call from Frank came in October, 3 weeks after the season ended, and 2 weeks after I'd gone back to full-time shifts at the distribution center, like nothing had happened. They offered a minor league contract, non-roster, AA invite in spring, $1,200 a month during the season, nothing during the off-season. It was, by any financial measure available to a 27-year-old man with a mortgage, an objectively terrible offer. I took it in under 4 seconds. Then I had to go into the plant on a Monday morning and quit a supervisor job I'd held for 8 years. Miguel walked me out to the lot afterward and asked what I was going to do, and when I told him, he didn't laugh, which I'll always be grateful for. He said, "My brother-in-law played in Mexico. He's 51 now and he still talks about it." Then he said, "Nobody talks about the warehouse, Ray." Spring training was its own education in humiliation. I showed up in Florida in February. 28 years old, married, a mortgage, a daughter starting kindergarten, into a clubhouse where the median age was 22 and where at least 6 guys had signing bonuses larger than my house. They called me Pops the first week. By the 3rd week, they called me Ray, mostly because I could throw strikes in the first inning of a backfield game at 9 in the morning. And at that level, in February, that's a skill people notice. I made the AA roster out of camp as a long reliever, which is the baseball equivalent of being handed a mop. I want to be honest about that season, because this is where the story could easily go smooth and it did not. I was demoted once, in June, to High A for 18 days after a stretch of 3 bad outings. Nobody tells you what a demotion feels like at 28. Younger guys treat it as weather. At my age, it feels like the system confirming a thing you already suspect about yourself. I drove to High A alone, in my own car, because they don't fly you down. I called Nicole from a parking lot outside Bowling Green and told her I thought this was how it ended. Quietly, in a lower league, with everyone politely not saying anything. She said, "You've been released or you've been demoted." I said demoted. She said, "Then you're still in it. Call me when something actually happens." I got back to AA on the 22nd of June, and from that day to the end of the season, I threw 51 innings with an ERA of 1.94, and I did it almost entirely with a fastball nobody feared and a changeup nobody could pick up, and with the specific ability, the one worth nothing on a radar gun at 17, to know what a hitter was thinking before he did. In September, at the end of that season, the pitching coordinator for the organization pulled me aside and told me they were adding me to the 40-man roster over the winter to protect me. I had to ask him twice what that meant. He looked at me strangely and said, "It means we think somebody would take you." I called Gus Hendry that week to tell him. He'd been the first person in professional baseball to say yes to me, and I felt like he ought to hear it from me directly. He listened, and then he said something I've never forgotten. "Don't you dare thank me. I didn't give you anything." I just stopped standing in front of the door. Then he asked if I was still throwing the changeup to both sides of the plate. I said yes. He said good, and hung up, because that's Gus. I turned 29 in February. Ruby was 5 and drew me another card. A man on a mound. This time there were people in the stands. I started that year in AAA, one level away, which is the cruelest address in professional sports. Everybody in that clubhouse is either on the way up, on the way down, or stuck. And everyone knows exactly which one they are. I was 36 days into the season when it happened. It was a Tuesday. I'd thrown 2 innings the night before. I was in the kitchen of the apartment 4 of us were splitting, eating cereal at 2 in the afternoon like the professional athlete I was, when my phone lit up with the manager's name. He said, "Come to the field early, bring your stuff." I want to describe the drive over, because that's the part I actually remember. Not the phone call, the drive. 11 minutes, and I did not think about the pros, or the money, or Dennis Cole. I thought about a piece of plywood nailed crooked to a garage wall on Route 9. I thought about my father saying, "Arm feels good though, right?" on the drive home from games I didn't play in. I thought about the 11 years I spent believing that being told no by one man in a windbreaker constituted evidence. He told me in his office with the door open, which I appreciated. He said the big league club needed a bullpen arm, that I was to be at the airport at 6. Then he stood up and shook my hand and said, "You're the oldest guy I've ever gotten to tell that to." I called Nicole from the parking lot. She was at work. She answered on the second ring, and I said her name, and before I got another word out, she said, "Ray?" Just that. And I heard her chair move, and I said, "They're calling me up." There's about 4 seconds of silence on that call. I've thought about those 4 seconds more than almost anything else in this whole story, because in those 4 seconds I understand what she'd carried. 8 months of extra shifts, a husband in a storage unit throwing at a tarp, a daughter asking when dad was coming home, every single person in our life who was too polite to say what they thought, and a few who weren't. Then she said, "Okay," and then she said, "Okay," again, and started crying, which she almost never does. I want to say something here to whoever's still listening. I know some of you are hearing this and thinking, "That's baseball. That's not my life." Fair enough. So let me take the baseball out of it. Somewhere along the way, somebody told you what you were. A teacher, a parent, a boss, an ex, a number on a scale or a page or a bank statement. And you didn't argue, because at that moment they seemed to know more than you did. And the thing about that sentence is it doesn't stay a sentence. It becomes the frame you build a whole life inside of. And after a few years you stop being able to see the frame at all. You just call it being realistic. I think about the men I met along the way who are still in it. Ramon, 34 now, playing his 9th independent season, who has never been offered a contract by an affiliated club, and who shows up every February anyway. Guys in that Rockford clubhouse with day jobs waiting for them in October. Ed Kowalski in his folding chair. None of them are in this story because they got called up. They're in it because they kept showing up for something after the world stopped keeping score of it. 11 years. That's what mine cost, and here's what I'd take back. If I could take back one thing, it isn't the years, it's that I never once tested it. Not once in 11 years did I check whether the man was right. I just took his word for it, the way you take a stranger's word for the time. I made my debut 8 days after that phone call, in the bottom of the 7th with 2 on and 1 out, in front of 31,000 people who had absolutely no idea who I was. I'd love to tell you I struck out the side. I got a ground ball to short, walked a guy on 5 pitches, then got a fly ball to left. 2/3 of an inning. 0 runs. Completely unremarkable. It's the best thing I've ever done. Nicole was in the stands, my mother was in the stands, and Ruby, 5 years old, in a hat too big for her head, who fell asleep in the 8th inning, and has since told everyone at her school that her dad plays baseball, which is a sentence I could not have imagined hearing in that hallway of closed doors at 26. Tommy Vance drove 9 hours and sat in the upper deck alone, and sent me a picture of the field from his seat, with no caption. I never heard from Dennis Cole. I've made my peace with that in a way that might disappoint you. I don't think he was cruel. He was tired and busy and certain, and certainty is the thing that does the damage. He looked at a 17-year-old for 3 days and mistook a snapshot for a forecast. People do that to each other constantly. Most of them never find out they were wrong. What I keep coming back to isn't him. It's the scorebooks. Because my father spent 19 years writing down every inning I ever threw, in pencil, in a hand I'd know anywhere, and he never once told me he was building a record of something. He just thought it was worth writing down. That's all. He thought I was worth writing down, on the days I struck out 14, and on the days I got pulled in the second, and he never made it conditional on where it went. I put the scorebooks on the shelf in Ruby's room this spring. She can't read the notes yet. She will. I don't know what somebody told you that you're still carrying. Maybe it was said carelessly, in an office, by a person who forgot it before they got to their car. Maybe you've built 10 years around it. I'm not going to tell you it's not too late, because I don't know your situation, and I've never trusted men who promise things they can't see. I'll just tell you what I know. The box is still in the closet, and a closet is not a verdict. If this story meant something to you, do 3 things for me. Follow this channel so you don't miss the next one. Share it with 5 people who need to hear it today. Not someday, today. And leave me an honest comment, not a kind one. Tell me what somebody said about you that you're still carrying, and whether you've ever gone back and checked if they were right. One more thing. Tell me what story you want to hear next. I'm listening.